Right, well, we're live from Tehran, Doha, Amman and Washington. But let's start in the U.S. capital. That's where John Hendren is live for us. John, lots of dominant questions from journalists trying to get in as many questions as they can to Donald Trump, especially, it seems, on opening the Strait of Hormuz. What did he say and sort of what stood out to you amongst the many things that he talked about?
That's right, Sarah. Trump seemed to relish that opportunity. He would take a few steps, take a question from one reporter, take a few more steps, take another. And at every opportunity he had, he went on a tear about NATO and the European allies, saying, as you pointed out, the UK didn't act quickly enough in allowing the U.S. to use its bases. Went on to criticize Europe, Australia, Japan, South Korea for not doing enough, in his view, to help out by sending ships to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Now, what he apparently wants is some kind of big military operation, because the U.S. military is largely otherwise occupied. But one of the problems he runs into is that he didn't warn most of these countries that the U.S. was going to go into that war, as we learned just a day ago when a Japanese reporter asked him why he hadn't alerted allies. And he said he wanted surprise. Well, he got surprise, but what he didn't get was cooperation. And that's one of the reasons why you ask countries in advance, or you consult them about these kinds of operations. And that was just part of the tear he went on today. He sent out a social media post calling NATO paper tigers and saying they were cowards. They complain about high oil prices, but they're not willing to help out. So he's really on a tear about this, and he's not being diplomatic. He is attacking the U.S. allies and really trying to bully them into cooperation. And perhaps that was contributing to the fact that the U.K. finally agreed to let the U.S. use its bases. And, of course, that didn't satisfy him either. So this is Trump versus his allies in the middle of a war that not only do the allies not like by and large, but the American people don't approve of by something like a 7-3 margin. So he's in a tough spot, and he's trying to get out of it.
John, and I have to ask you about what Trump said about there being no leadership remaining in Iran. Well,
the big question there is what has happened to Mujtaba Khamenei. We know that he has been injured. Bibi Netanyahu talked about this in a news conference earlier, saying he didn't know who was in charge. We've had a written statement, allegedly, from him. And so the U.S. doesn't... The stated goal of the U.S. is not regime change, but they certainly want to know who they're dealing with. And at the moment, they say they don't.
All right, thanks very much, John Hendren there. That's the latest from the US. But let's now go to Iran's capital, Tehran, because that's where Ali Hashem is joining us live. Ali, we were just talking about the Iranian's new supreme leader there, John and I, Mujtaba Khamenei. Well, he's announced a slogan, if you like, for the Persian New Year. And, of course, it's the first day of Eid for Muslims around the world. What was the message that he had, especially for Iranians?
Well, Mujtaba Khamenei's second statement was in the ceremony of the Iranian New Year. And just like the first one, it was a written statement. In this one, he emphasized more on messaging towards the Iranians, emphasized on unity and on how to confront this war. He mentioned the war in 2025, its impact on Iran, the protests in 2026, January 2026, and described them as a coup d'etat. Then he spoke about this war and what the enemies, according to Mujtaba Khamenei, want from Iran, calling on people not to listen to whatever is coming from outside, to take the news from inside, from local media outlets, despite differences in culture and politics. The same thing he called on people from different walks of life to unite, because from his point of view as a leader, he needs a coherent society. He needs an internal front, a strong internal front at the time he's facing a war outside. Then he messaged the neighbors of Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, calling on them to have better relations. Men said that Iran did not attack Oman or Turkey, and that Israel is trying to create a rift between Iran and its neighbors. Also, regarding the other neighbors, it was clear, and actually it's obvious now for whoever is watching Iran, is that the Iranians know there is a rift. We're not anymore in a situation where there is misunderstanding. Actually, the relations between Iran and its neighbors, especially the ones in the Gulf, went towards hostilities and enmity. And it's clear that the Iranian officials are seeking now to find a way, because the day after would come. The war will end one day, and they will have to live together. This is the destiny of geography.
OK, well, Ali, I want you to stay with us, because we've also been hearing from Iran's president. Now, he's delivered his Persian New Year address, and he says that Tehran doesn't seek war with its neighbours. Masoud Pezeshkian is blaming Iran's enemies for regional tension.
We propose that to establish peace and stability in the region, a regional security structure be formed from Islamic countries, ensuring peace, security and stability. We do not need the presence of outsiders in the region. We can establish an Islamic assembly of the Middle East among the Islamic countries of the region, and within this assembly develop security, economic and cultural relations with one another. We must not fight each other or fall into the trap that has been laid for us.
So tell me, Ali, Pezeshkian there proposing a creation of a regional security framework, he says, for cooperation and stability. Is that, do you think, an outlandish idea, given the tensions now that Iran has with its neighbours, of course, the Gulf countries, over attacks on its soil?
I'll get to this point, but let me just read this latest warning coming from Khatim al-Anbiya headquarters, which is the armed forces headquarters, warning to the United Arab Emirates that if there's another aggression from the country towards the Iranian islands of Abu Musa and Greater Tum in the Persian Gulf, the powerful armed forces of Iran will strike Ras Al Khaimah in the UAE with crushing blows. So this is latest just coming now. With respect to what Pezeshkian is saying, well, it's not only Pezeshkian, it's not only the president, it's now most of the Iranian officials are foreseeing a new regional order post-war. So this is what they're thinking of. They're thinking that the moment this war ends, there should be a new regional order. What this regional order will be, the way they are presenting it is that it should be foreigners free. It should be mainly between the states of this region. So how much would they really be able to achieve that? This is questionable.
Yeah, OK, thank you. That's the update there from our correspondent Ali Hashim in Tehran. And joining us here in the studio is Ross Harrison. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and also author of Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Ross, I mean, you are clearly an expert on how Iran is thinking. I just want to start with, we've heard a statement there from the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, talking about creating a regional security framework. This is what he would like for cooperation and stability between regional countries, and in like an Islamic council, if you like. And then the same day, we've now just received, as Ali Hashim, our reporter, was saying there, Iran warns it will target UAE's Ras Al Khaimah if Iranian Gulf islands are again attacked from there. That's according to Iranian state media. There somehow seems to be a contradiction rather somewhat. What is Iran's policy? Because on the one hand, it is attacking, but on the other hand, it keeps referring to the GCC as our brotherly neighbouring countries.
So, Sara, I think what you're seeing is a pointing to the future a bit and what Iran's aspirations would be when this war is over. They know that there's a tyranny of geography and that they live in this region, and they have to basically get along at some point, have some kind of modus vivendi or some kind of compromise with the GCC states, but they're in the middle of war. So I think what you're seeing is the war play out. And, you know, war is a continuation of politics by other means. Clausewitz, the famous Prussian strategist, said that. So I think what they're trying to do is establish a political endgame, right? At the same time, the political endgame is cooperation and some kind of neighborly concord, while at the same time they're fighting a war. And that's, I think, even though they're contradictory, if you think about them as one is short term and one long term.
Short term and long term, that's what they're trying to do, looking at both plans.
I think so.
Now, going back to what we were talking about with our reporter in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump, the U.S. president, saying that there's no leadership in Iran to talk to. Do you think that's true?
No, it's definitely not true, but I think it raises a question of how much real coordination there is between Washington and Jerusalem. Because clearly what we've seen over the course of this war is that Israel has been focusing on decimating the leadership. So Ali Khamenei, Ali Larijani, and then the IRGC spokesperson most recently, and so forth and so on, then the intelligence chief. So I think if, in fact, the United States wants to have an interlocutor and eventually have some kind of a negotiating partner, well, they have to send that message to Jerusalem that there has to be some kind of regime stability. But I think that what's going on is that that Israel, essentially, their goal is not to have someone to talk to, but it's basically to bring down this regime. And so it's not clear how much symmetry there is or consistency between the U.S. and the Israeli position, or it could be just good cop, bad cop. Right now, they seem to be both speaking as bad cops.
Yeah, on the same page. All right, thanks very much. That's all the time we have for at the moment. Ross Harrison there, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Right, well, Iran has launched a barrage of missiles into Israel, and one of the attacks damaged the ground near a residential building that happened in Kiryat Ono. Several attacks were reported throughout the day, with another incident in the city of Rehovot. Meanwhile, strikes by Hezbollah injured 2 people. That's in northern Israel. And a Palestinian was injured after fragments of an intercepted Iranian missile struck an area near the walls of the old city in occupied East Jerusalem. The fragments landed about 300 meters from Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Israeli police say they were conducting searches to locate fallen parts of projectiles. And for more on this, let's now go to Rob McBride, who's live for us from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Rob, I mean, sirens are now, actually in the last few minutes, they've been heard across Israel. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, it has been a long day of intensive missile activity with the sirens being sounded across broad swathes of northern and central Israel at least 10 times during the hours of daylight. That's with detection of missiles coming from Iran, but also more alarms, especially in the north, being raised with missiles being detected coming from the north from Iranian-backed Hezbollah. There have been reports of a number of missiles or debris from intercepted missiles falling, some damage and also casualties. Places like Haifa once again being targeted. Probably the most notable strike of the day, though, was this fall of debris in the old city in occupied East Jerusalem, just 350 meters from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, it did cause extensive damage to this historic part of the city. Very little in the way of casualties, thankfully. But it did come at the end of a day of tension in and around the old city, with the Israeli occupation authorities using emergency powers which have been in place since the start of this war and which they are considering now extending to close the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These powers allow the authorities to control various activities. One of them is the gathering of people for worship. They took the controversial decision to close the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the day when many worshippers traditionally turn up, of course, to mark Eid al-Fitr and the end of Ramadan. It did lead to some angry clashes. It's the first time this has happened since 1967. There were some angry clashes. Tear gas was deployed, but the authorities did maintain this closure, the cordoning off of Al-Aqsa, while the worshippers themselves did pray, in any case, on the outsides of the police cordon.
All right, thank you very much. Rob McBride there on the latest of what's happening in Israel. And for Israelis spending nights in bomb shelters, it's become a part of their daily life. At least 15 people have been killed in attacks by Iran and Hezbollah since the war on Iran started late last month. Israel relies on air defense systems and also a wide network of shelters to keep people safe. But as our reporter Noor Auda explains, not all Israeli citizens enjoy the same level of protection.
As Israel's wars with Iran and Hezbollah rage on, access to public shelters and safe rooms is once again front and center on the mind of ordinary Israelis, especially in northern Israel, where many people remain exposed. Here in the occupied West Bank, there are hundreds of Israeli military bases and illegal settlements like this one. They have sirens and bomb shelters and safe rooms, while citizens inside Israel itself do not. Jewish Israelis in communities on the border with Lebanon say they've been left without protection. In November 2024, the Prime Minister assured them they could safely return to their towns and rebuild because Hezbollah was defeated. Today, their damaged homes and charred buildings tell a very different tale. But Israeli citizens of Palestinian descent, who account for roughly 20% of the population in Israel, are the least protected. Their share of public shelters is a mere 0.3%. In Sakhnin, a Palestinian-Israeli town of 33,000, there are no public shelters, only a single recently installed, tiny, fortified room.
Any self-respecting state would provide security and build public shelters. Look at the Jewish communities. There are public shelters in every town and kibbutz, but in Arab towns, there are no shelters.
Palestinian Israelis in nearby Zarazir suffered heavy damage to property from missiles on March 13th. 60 residents were injured. People in the small town had no public shelters to run to when the sirens blared. This disparity is long-standing. In recent years, several Palestinian Israeli citizens have been killed in attacks by Hezbollah and from Iranian missiles. In 2025, 4 members of the same family were killed in Tamra. The tragedies did not lead to a meaningful change. These communities remain without shelters. For these unprotected civilians, every day of the war feels like a gamble with their lives. Noor Aoudeh, Al Jazeera.
Well, Israel's military is intensifying attacks across South Lebanon, bombing civilian buildings and forcing hundreds of thousands of people from their homes. The army is being accused of cutting off the area from the rest of the country. France has been trying to mediate the conflict. But as Zaina Khoda reports from Beirut, there's no end in sight to the violence between Israel and Hezbollah.
A war in its third week, with no path towards a ceasefire. Israel is threatening that what's coming will be more intense and more severe as long as Hezbollah continues to launch rockets across the border and refuses to disarm. It's already expanded its targets, destroying bridges across southern Lebanon. Israel says they are on Hezbollah supply routes. Fuel stations, it says, are affiliated to the group, have also been hit. The Israeli military has ordered hundreds of thousands living there to leave. They have little choice, with an aerial campaign that has killed more than 1,000 people. Paramedics, too, have been targeted and killed. Their centers and ambulances hit. And while Israel says they are being used by Hezbollah, human rights groups say the strikes amount to war crimes. Israel is accused of cutting off the south from the rest of the country. Its troops are advancing into Lebanese territory. Israeli army video shows them operating in border villages, but they have come under fire. Hezbollah is hoping to increase the cost of the war, but it's not clear how long it can sustain the fight. France has been trying to mediate an end to the hostilities, but before the French foreign minister's arrival, the Israeli Security Cabinet said it was discussing unprecedented action against Hezbollah. A clear message that a proposal by Lebanon's government to offer a permanent non-aggression pact with Israel was not enough. All the while, negotiations are being conducted under fire as both sides try to secure military gains for political leverage.
More than 1 million people are struggling to survive. That's 1/5 of the population. Some are living in tents or sleeping in their cars. The government is unable to deal with the challenge, and UN agencies complain about the lack of cash because of a shortfall in global funding for humanitarian aid.
Lebanon's appeals to President Donald Trump to stop the attacks have been met with silence. the U.S. has reportedly lost faith in a leadership that promised to disarm Hezbollah. So with no diplomatic opening, it's uncertain where this war is heading. Zana Khudr, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Iran has carried out another wave of attacks on regional countries. There have been drone and missile strikes across the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And that's where a refinery was struck in Kuwait. It's the second day Iran has targeted Mina al-Ahmadi refinery. The state-owned oil company says no one was killed or injured, and the facility is a major oil export hub. Let's speak to Dmitry Medvedenko live for us here in Doha. That's Qatar's capital. Can you tell us what's the latest in terms of those attacks across the region?
Well, Sarah, we've had a number of reports just in the past hour, some coming from our teams in the Gulf. In the UAE, our team, Al Jazeera, is telling us that they've been hearing explosions as the alarms were blasting of an incoming attack. And in Kuwait, 3 times alarms have gone off in the past hour and 7 times during the day. And explosions, as our team is telling us, can be heard towards the north from interceptors over there. Saudi Arabia has also been reporting attacks, but that's become a very regular occurrence. Every couple of hours, the government there, the Ministry of Defense, says it's downing drones, especially in the east, where there's a major Shaiba oil field there, but also near Riyadh in the past 24 hours. And there's some developments coming from Bahrain. Alarms were sounded there around several hours ago, around 4 hours ago. And we've just seen a message posted on X from Nabil Al-Hama. He's the media advisor to the King of Bahrain. He says, His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa has announced that the Kingdom of Bahrain will contribute to international efforts aimed at securing navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, thereby enhancing maritime security and ensuring the smooth flow of global trade, making it the first country in the GCC to actually contribute or announce a willingness to contribute to those efforts to securing the Strait of Hormuz, and perhaps spelling escalation in this conflict so far.
OK, that's interesting. Obviously, it seems like responding to Trump's request. Thanks very much, Dmitry Medvedenko from Doha.